revision session number 6 on medicine. This is about how to answer the different types of question. Okay, so just follow the slides. The changes should be as I go through them, so it's pretty straightforward. First thing to note is you'll be given 2 booklets in the medicine exam. You'll be given a sources booklet, separate source booklet, and your actual answer booklet. Okay, I'll shuttle between the two as I'm going through this presentation. Okay. First of all, let's have a quick look at the separate sources booklet. You'll see there that you've just got a couple of sources, source A and source B. Remember to highlight only the relevant information on the questions. If you highlight everything, you're highlighting nothing. But write all over it. I mean, this is yours to use in the exam. Make sure you annotate the sources before you start your answer. And remember, you're talking about not only content, you're also talking about provenance. Provenance being nature, origin and purpose. And remember, you're focusing on the strengths of the sources. Okay? How comprehensive is it? How accurate is it? And how typical is it? The acronym there is CAT. How comprehensive or full is it? How accurate is it? Absolutely true. And is it typical of this type of source? And is its nature useful? What it is? Is its origin useful? When it's from? And is its purpose useful? What is it trying to achieve? Or are there limits to its usefulness based on those things? Okay? Right, first of all though, the very first question you'll answer doesn't need any of those sources, so I'll just discard those for the first section. The very first question you will be required to answer will be describe 2 features of. Okay, so in this case it's describe 2 features of the support trench system on the Western Front. Note that that doesn't specifically ask you anything about medicine. Okay, so you could be asked something that is just about the Western Front. In this particular question, I don't think any of the more valuable questions will ask you anything that isn't to do with medicine specifically, but be prepared. Okay, so first of all you need to identify one key feature and develop it with extra detail and knowledge. Okay, I've shared a couple of examples with you in lesson, but use the language of the question. As always, use the language of the question. So one key feature of support trench system was it was built in zigzags. This meant that if an explosion went off in one section of the trench, it wouldn't be able to kill people further down the trench. The blast would be absorbed by the corners that were built into the trench system. A second key feature of the support trench system was that it was linked by communication trenches, so that soldiers didn't have to get out. This meant that, or this was important because soldiers didn't have to get out of the trenches to make it between the 2 different types of, between the front line and the support trench and the reserve trench. Okay, things like that. Make sure you're using that language. It doesn't have to be a long answer, but don't spend any more than 5 minutes on this. You can do it in 2 good sentences. Okay? Second question, this is where you need your sources, so you'll see on the right hand side of the page that I've got the sources from the source booklet. Study sources A and B in the sources booklet. How useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into something? Okay, it'll always be worded like that. In this case, it's how useful are sources A and B for an inquiry into the problems involved in performing operations on the Western Front. Explain your answer using sources A and B and your own knowledge. So obviously if you only focus on A and B, you're going to get half marks. If you only use your own knowledge and don't talk about the sources, you're going to find it very difficult to get any marks because you're being specifically asked to comment on the usefulness, the utility. Okay, so hopefully you've annotated the sources in the booklet before you started the answer. You've broken them down by their content. Okay, horribly mutilated, stretchers were put on the floor. We couldn't get the wounded into hospital quickly enough. Okay, doctors give anaesthetics, the rest of it. Okay, think about what their nature is though. Source A is an account by Reverend Leonard Pearson, who was the army chaplain. So he wasn't even a doctor, he wasn't medically trained in any capacity, but he was obviously dealing with wounded soldiers. The second source, source B, is from the diary of Oswald Robertson, an army surgeon working on the Western Front. Hi. Okay. So remember, you're breaking them down according to their nature, origin and purpose. When you're writing your answer, use your annotations, make judgments about the usefulness of each. Remember, different types of source will have different use values. A diary, the diary of Oswald Robertson, he won't have any reason to lie. He was there, he experienced it, it's probably quite truthful. But a weakness is he didn't. You can't generalise from his experience to the experience of all soldiers. Okay. So back to the left-hand side of the page. Make sure you include relevant own knowledge. This will help when discussing accuracy. Also provide contextual background knowledge. Okay. What inferences can you make about the problems of carrying out operations on the Western Front? But also, what do you know about things that are related to that? So, for example, source B says, I could only transfuse an occasional patient. Well, what do you know about blood transfusions and how they were developed later on in the war? Okay, let's have a look at some examples. Okay, so types of things you might say in this question. The strength of source A is useful because it helps us understand, or we also learn, or we can also infer from the source. Ways into the weaknesses are, however, source A has some limitations. It does not provide us with information on or evidence of. Okay. Also, that's just to do with content. You also need your nature, origin, and purpose. So think strengths are. Source A is are. If it's an interview with someone, what are the strengths of that? If it's a diary entry, what are the advantages of that? The origin, when it's from. However, we need to be careful about totally trusting the impression given in source A because it was written by an army surgeon. He wasn't a doctor, he wasn't a medical professional, that kind of thing. If he wasn't at the battle, he wasn't even there, he can't necessarily comment on it. Okay. Purpose, what's it trying to achieve? Source B was written to report on the injuries, not to attack the government, so probably wouldn't have negative information, blah, blah, blah. Source B is very typical. Many soldiers wrote diaries in the trenches. Source A is quite accurate, as it mentions, blah, 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 which I know is true. Or source B is not very comprehensive because it only talks about one battle, so it can't tell me about others. Right, they're all sentence starters that you can use. Don't forget to say how all of this makes the sources useful or not. You don't have to make a judgment on the best source. There's nothing in the mark scheme that asks you specifically to make a judgment, say source B is more useful than source A, but if you want to, you're not going to lose any marks for doing it. Okay? Remember to comment not only on content, what is in the sources, but also comment on nature, origin and purpose. Okay? So that's your question 2, sources A and B, utility question. The next question, question 3, this is a new one for this year for all us teachers as well. How could you follow up source B to find out more about something? Okay, how could you follow up source B to find out more about something? In this case, how could you follow up source B to find out more about the problems involved in performing operations on the Western Front? In your answer, you must give the question you would ask and the type of source you could use. Now, really what you're being asked to do is make sure that all parts of your answer link together. Okay? Anything you say, as long as it's thoughtful and relevant, is going to be fine. But the type of source that you would use has to be specifically geared towards answering the question that you've asked. Okay? And you have to explain how it would help. So let's walk through this. Detail in source B that I would follow up. I would make sure the detail you want to find out more about is linked to the focus of the question. So you might pull a quote from the source you're using. The question I would ask. Make sure the question you ask should be linked to the detail you've selected from the source and helping you stay focused on the inquiry question. What type of source I could use? Make sure you choose a source that will help you with your question, and there on the right you can see the examples. Different types of sources. National records. So you've got National Army records for individual soldiers, national newspaper reports, government reports, medical articles by doctors who took part in the war, or local records, personal accounts by doctors who were there, photographs, hospital records, army statistics. These are all things that can help you answer the question. Memorise some of those. They're useful things to drop into that third box in this answer. And then you've got to explain how it would help you answer the question. Explain the advantage of using that particular type of source over another type. What is it about army statistics that will help you answer the question that you've asked? Okay, what is it about a government report or a newspaper article that will help you answer the question that you've asked. Make sure it all links together. That's the key thing there. Okay? And then we're into the main bit, the main part of the exam, the bit that's all about the medieval medicine right up to modern day medicine. Okay? And the first one here is a 4-mark question. Explain one way in which something was similar or different to something later on. Okay, so explain one way in which people's reactions to the plague in Britain were similar in the 14th and 17th centuries. Okay, you might be asked about difference. You might be asked about similarity. Where you're asked about difference, make sure you use whereas to explain difference. If you're asked about similarity, you can use similarly. Okay, so you see the writing frame on the right. In the first time period, so in the 14th century, people's reaction to the plague was, okay, blah, blah, blah. Similarly, in the 17th century, people's reactions were similar in that, blah, 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 whatever you want to say. And then explain the difference. Now, this is the trickier bit. This is different or similar because. Explain the similarity or difference with reference to IIAS. So specific individuals, specific institutions, specific attitudes, or specific aspects or items of science and technology. Okay. A similarity, people with a similar reaction would be that both time periods thought it was sent by God. So in the first time period there were flagellants. In the second time period, doctors still prescribed prayer, believe it or not. So you've got that link. There is a slight difference, but you've made sure you've made it clear. This is similar because of the attitudes. It was still a very religious time. Okay. Moving on, the 12-mark question, question 4. Explain why there was rapid change in something. That's the usual phrase. I've not seen anything different yet. Explain why there was rapid change in some aspect of the course. Okay, and in this case, it's explain why there was rapid change in the treatment of illness in Britain during the 20th century. You'll be given 2 bullet points. You must use those bullet points, but you must also include information of your own. Now, you can include a completely separate paragraph. So you could write a paragraph on magic bullets. You can write a paragraph on high-tech treatment. And then you can include a third paragraph on, say, penicillin or robotics. Well, you've got high-tech treatment in there, I suppose. But you can include a third paragraph that is nothing to do with the previous 2. Or you can get away with doing this. You can write 2 good paragraphs on encompassing the bullet points, just adding lots of own knowledge to them. Okay. So, although it says here you must write about 3 different reasons, 3 separate paragraphs, that's not strictly true. Okay, you can do it you can do it in 2 good paragraphs, and I recommend that because it's a faster way of doing it. Okay, what is true is that each paragraph should be a peel, point, evidence, explain, link paragraph. Okay, so you need a point, evidence, explain, link back to the question paragraph, and you need to use solid connectors. Now you should know that you've practiced that a lot. Okay, lots of howevers, lots of in addition, lots of this is important because, lots of for example. Okay, use those connectors to help make sure you hit the peel points, to make sure a good paragraph is a good paragraph, and that's true all the way up to PhD level. Okay, I wrote in peel paragraphs when I was writing my PhD, so you need to make sure that you're using that. That is a basic building block of a good piece of extended writing, that peel paragraph. So within each paragraph or reason, you should start each paragraph with a sentence that identifies for the examiner what factor or example you're talking about in this paragraph, using the words of the question. Always use that language of the question. Okay? So one reason there was rapid change in the treatment of illness in Britain during the 20th century was magic bullets. For example, Paul Ehrlich and Dr. Hatter developed Salvarsan 606. This was important because it helped with the treatment of syphilis and meant that fewer people suffered death as a consequence. Okay, this links to the question by meaning there was rapid change in the treatment of that particular illness. Okay, so use those connectives wherever possible. Now, a separate conclusion, just scooting down to the bottom of this page, you need a separate conclusion summing up the precise cause of change from each paragraph. Yet your paragraph doesn't have to be very long though, okay? What I would recommend is selecting one thing as being the most important factor, okay? So choose one of your factors that was the most important reason for rapid change. Overall, the most important factor in bringing about rapid change in the treatment of illness in Britain was, this is because, right? And then explain why it's the most important factor, because maybe without magic bullets, there wouldn't have been further magic bullets and a quest to find penicillin, if you like. Okay. Make sure all things link to the next stage. And we're on to the last question now. 5 or 6. Choose 5 or 6. Answer either question 5 or question 6. This will always be a statement followed by how far do you agree. So it's looking for balance. Okay. You've got to show reasons to agree with the statement, and then however there are reasons to disagree with the statement. Make sure you use the bullet points, but you must also include your own information, okay, your own knowledge. So it can be done in 2 really good long peel paragraphs and a final judgment saying which side of the argument you're coming down on. Okay, so let's pull it apart. Look on the right hand side. Take time to plan your answer. Your 3 factors. You're given 2 in the bullet points. Try and include a 3rd. Put them under for or against the statement in question, with specific points you'll use in your answer. If you have more points to discuss in the for heading, your answer will probably be in agreement with the statement. Or if you have more points against the statement, then your argument will probably be against, your judgment will probably be against the statement. Even if you agree or disagree, you should still discuss both sides. Just remember to say how far you agree or disagree and why. Be clear about the reasons and criteria for your judgments. Why was one factor or example more important than another? That's going to be the difference between 8s and 9s and the rest of the GCSE levels. If you can explain why one criteria is more important than another, and you can do it logically, and you can do it using key language. Okay, key historical language. Okay, so a little basic structure there underneath that. Paragraph 1, on the one hand, your first point. On the one hand, I agree with this statement because. On the other hand, there are reasons to support this because blah, blah, blah. However, paragraph 3 as well, you might present the other side of the argument. And then paragraph 4 is your conclusion, your judgment overall. And again, just as with the 12-mark question, you're going to want to say one reason is more important than another. Well, you agree with one side over the other side of the argument because. What is it that makes you convinced that one side of the argument is better than the other? Last point on this, remember SPAG for this question. Spelling, punctuation and grammar. There are 4 marks available here for SPAG. So this turns a 16-mark question into a 20-mark question. You have 30 minutes on this though. This is you can really get into this. Is a meaty question that you can take your time a little bit on and make sure you've got lots of detail in there. Okay? Have a good look through this PowerPoint. And, turn the sound off and pause it and look back through the different guidance. This is an exam paper, an annotated exam paper. So have a really good look at the stuff that's written on here. And be familiar. Forewarned is forearmed, so you know what the exam paper looks like if you look through this now, and there won't be any surprises. You know how the questions will be worded, and you know how to lay out your answers. Okay.